Hello, this is DC Hammer. Welcome to the DC Hammer Show, where we air live broadcasts Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Today's co-host at the front end of the show will be Arrow, and John Adams may be joining us later in the broadcast. So let's get right to it.
Yeah, so glad you got those technical details hammered out, DC.
Okay, so China. So North Korea's Kim Jong-un has arrived in Beijing for talks, and I've got an article here. This is from China News Net, and it's a new feed that I found that specializes in news that's coming specifically from the Asian side of the planet, and they're talking about that North Korea's Kim Jong-un has arrived in Beijing, and that was as of yesterday. And he is then meeting with the Chinese, with Xi, and this is a prelude to Kim then meeting again with President Trump. So there was, the suspicion is that there was a secret meeting between representatives of North Korea and representatives of the United States in Vietnam a while ago. The location of the second summit was discussed supposedly, and whatever arrangements needed to be ironed out in order for President Trump to continue on his path to peace as he continues to make the world safe again by pressuring Kim against the wishes of his former deep state masters. And the purpose is to get them to abandon their nuclear program, to resume peaceful relations with the neighbors, and over time then to set the stage for the eventual reunification of the Korean Peninsula, and an outcome that was only a dream before 2017, and the true basis for a Nobel Peace Prize for President Trump, one that would actually be earned regardless of whether these efforts actually do forge a true and lasting peace from conflict, that whether those aspirations will be fully realized. But comparing what's happening now to what was taking place between 2009 and to the end of 2016, when there is absolutely no chance of a prospect for peace during those years, but for some reason the Nobel Peace Prize Committee found it fitting to go ahead and confer upon Barack Hussein Obama the Peace Prize, without realizing that he was merely a puppet of the shadow government warmongers instead of a true peace seeker, as is President Trump. What do you think, Arrow?
Well, I did notice that one of the members of that Nobel Committee was expressing regret recently. I know I'd heard some rumblings before, but it sounds like it was somewhat official that they actually said, we made a mistake when we did that for Obama. So, you know what? I don't think that those standards apply anymore, and that may be a good thing.
Right, and what's interesting here is I think even the relationship between North Korea and China has dramatically changed with the intervention of President Trump and what he has been doing in order to put pressure on both of those communist states, on both Red China, Communist China, and on North Korea, to make a change in the way both countries perceive and act towards the rest of the world, but also then how China can no longer prop up North Korea to be the bully of the world and to throw missiles across Japan and do other things on a moment's notice whenever they feel the whim to do so, to stir up trouble, to have somebody on the world stage chase the shiny object in their right hand, as in the left hand they are dumping rock and dirt into the middle of the South Pacific, into the South China Sea, in order to build islands that they then turn into missile platforms to threaten the rest of the world. So with Kim now turning to diplomacy and away from being a little rocket man, I think this truly is a continuing indication that regardless of what's happening here, regardless of what's happening in the rest of the globe with other issues, you've still got President Trump undistracted, undeterred from going forward, taking strong steps in order to ensure that what we do from here on out is continue to forge a lasting peace with players that we were former adversaries with, and turn them into maybe not allies, but at least not face to face with challenges that could end up in a nuclear holocaust.
Absolutely, and I really think that that Trump intimidates the deep state by being able to see through their games. He completely saw through the game that North Korea was playing. Not that nuclear war is a game, but that the whole idea that they were some rogue state and didn't have deep ties to China was basically didn't last 2 seconds with him. And President Trump is able to use that as leverage against Xi and say, look, we see your game. We know. Do you want us to tell the world? Something like that happened. And the world is better off for it.
Absolutely. And so now you've got this situation in which the North Koreans, the communist regime in North Korea, has held off on additional nuclear weapons testing. They've been destroying some of their facilities. You're not going to hear any of this in the mainstream press, because the last thing in the world they would want you to know that we're actually forging a peace. And what they would want to do is, first of all, the mainstream media, the Marxist screaming media, as I call it, are pawns of the CIA and the other warmongering entities within the deep state overlords, the shadow government that umbrellas the earth and continues us down the path of war and conflict, death and destruction in order to become rich, to drain our resources from us, to divert our attention, to bog us down in the emotion that's involved whenever you're dealing with caskets coming home with dead bodies of soldiers that have been sent over to fight for our freedom. And a lot of times they are actually put into situations where they are merely propping up the puppet states and the deep state in order for them to continue their bad activities. So I believe that with the partnership in the White House of Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State and President Trump as the president, and them working hand in hand with what they're doing with Xi and with Kim, I really think that not only is the relationship between the United States and China improving, but also, and there's some light at the end of the tunnel, that it may end up being with an equal platform on trade and a variety of other things. But also then that Kim is continuing to do everything that would lead you to believe that he is truly dedicated to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and the reunification with the South in a peaceful way. And I say, let's continue to pray that this is the direction it'll continue to go.
Yes, and this could not come at a better time for the world and a worse time for the globalists, because, as you know, DC, what these guys always do, and I'm talking about a cabal that's been running the global politics for decades, if not centuries, these guys, once their money scheme has come to an end, their Ponzi money scheme is running out now, and what do they usually do? They start a war. So that's their way out. That provides them with plausible deniability. Oh, we can't get these supplies to these poor, starving people on the other side of the country because we're in the middle of a big war and our lives depend on winning the war. So sorry for all this economic disruption and the chaos in the society, but gee, we've got to fight this war. Well, they were not able to do that this time. Their game has been run out. They've been called on the carpet. They can't continue any longer. They were really counting, I'm convinced, counting on North Korea to be the trigger to pull the world into World War III, which would give them a chance to set up their tyrannical global monetary system under the guise of we're saving the world, when in fact they're the ones that are subverting it. So it couldn't come at a better time for peace to break out.
I'm with you. And speaking of peace breaking out, or issues that are happening on another part of the world that lead you to believe that good things are on the horizon, or even taking place right now, this is an article from the Jerusalem Post. And I don't know if everybody was paying attention during the holiday season. We were diverted by a whole lot of things that were going on. But in the Holy Land, the celebration all over the world, but specifically in the Holy Land, the celebration of Hanukkah in 2018 took place starting December 2nd and lasted through December 10. It's an 8-day process every year. It's an 8-day celebration each year. And on the last day of Hanukkah, that was December 10, 2018, and Hanukkah, by the way, literally means dedication, and that word will come in handy in a minute here. A new altar was built outside the old wall of the Jewish temple in accordance with Jewish law, and it was unveiled and dedicated for use in the yet-to-be-built third temple by several temple activist organizations. This sets the stage for the building of the new temple, if you're so inclined to believe in biblical prophecy and what that all entails. I'm sure a lot of people are going to speculate on the importance of this event, the event of the actual dedication, the building and the dedication of an altar outside of the wall, the old wall in Jerusalem, and as far as what that means for the future. But I know this for a fact. It's been 70 years since Israel was declared a nation, and the Jews returned to the land, per the Bible, and in 2018, President Trump officially recognized Jerusalem as the true capital of Israel and moved the United States Embassy there. And now, a period of months later, before the end of 2018, you had then the erection of this altar. That was another important thing that people have been working in Israel for years. There are these societies that have come together, an initiative. Professor Hillel Weiss and others have been pushing for these the building of the altar as a prelude to the building of the temple, who have no idea when and where things might go on from here. But I'm sure that there's a lot of people in the religious community, that whether it be the Jewish community or the Christian community, they're very interested in the fact that that altar has been built. What do you think, Errol?
Well, I definitely think it is a very interesting event. I'm going to give you a little counterpoint there. And the one thing I think we need to be aware of is that the evil cabal that I was just talking about are fully aware of these things, and they actually like to orchestrate their conflicts. And with the stability of Israel and I would say the pretty close to satanic control of Islam, I can't help but wonder if the bad guys want to trigger their Armageddon and use that as a global excuse for another major global war. So, yeah, I like to see prophecy being fulfilled, but I'm all for manifesting the spirit of light as opposed to the spirit of darkness. And I'm aware that when we see some prophecy on the horizon coming into view, that the bad guys want to commandeer it as well. So I have definitely a watchful eye in that area.
And we'll keep an eye on that one and see if next steps are taken, or will the altar be taken down after it was originally put up? Will it stay there as a permanent fixture? These are things we'll keep an eye on and see what happens. Here in the United States, there have been so much activity that's been going on with the building of the wall, the shutting down of the government, and outcry on the part of a lot of people that are true patriots in this country to ensure that action is taken to not only secure our border, but to implement a working and logical immigration system. And this article comes to us from Breitbart. The Angel Moms are a group that got together. These are people, primarily mothers of children that have been murdered by illegal aliens over the past couple decades. And they have gotten together, they formed a committee, they gather together, they share, it's a support group, it's an information dissemination and gathering facility. These Angel Moms are dedicated to ensure that their slain children do not go unnoticed, do not go unrecognized for the sacrifice that's been made within these individual families on the altar, going back to the altar of open borders. And they have gotten to the point where they are saying that too much is too much, and these are the actual slain family members of some of these people. The head of the Angel Mom movement is Julie Govach, And what you're seeing here is Spencer Golvach, who was 25 years old, Houston, Texas, when he was murdered by an illegal alien. And then the other mothers with their children that have been sacrificed to open borders. And this is interesting timing that this would come out, and that the angel moms now are not going silent anymore. They are, in what this story talks about, is that they are sick and tired of the talk, not only from President Trump, but anybody that talks about these immigration issues. They want immediate action on the border and illegal immigration, and they are now stepping up and putting pressure on anyone they can talk to, passionate patriots, leaders in the government, and others, to say that this is time for this all to end. And it's interesting. I'm gonna move on to the follow-up piece to this, but want to give you, Arrow, an opportunity to punch in if you want to say a few words about this, what's going on here.
Oh, I just think it's great, like you do, because there is a tendency for people to say, well, this is private and I can't get involved because this is such a deeply private matter. But I believe it takes courage to go into the public arena. And some people might misinterpret that. But I think it's wonderful that these people are taking this stand.
And it's amazing that they are able to say some things that others wouldn't. It's often bothered me that we've gotten to this point in our culture where it seems that the only time you can speak out on an issue is if you're actually directly connected in a visceral way to whatever that topic is that you're discussing. So you can't talk about the problems that disabled Americans have unless you've lost an arm. You can't talk about what's going on with the the immigration system unless you've gone through something like these angel moms have gone through. And that's just a bunch of, that is, I have to pull myself back a little bit. That's not right. Anybody should have the ability in this country. This is the country of free speech. At least it will be, as long as we don't have people like Hillary Clinton in the White House and Nancy Pelosi changing the laws in the legislature. We will continue to have free speech, and anybody should be able to opine about any topic they believe about and express their views. And so, but it carries more weight for whatever reason. This is just the state of the world today, the culture that we're in right now, the society in which we live. That because they have lost people, they can, people of their own family members, they can speak with a stronger voice, with a bigger microphone, a bigger megaphone than other people. And when what they are saying is, not only do they want the wall built, but also not done in a way that gives up what shouldn't be given up in order to get the wall. In other words, they are saying, no way should we only do the wall if amnesty is given to illegal aliens. That is not a fair bargain. That is not the way this should go. Build the wall and deal with the issue of people that are in this country illegally separate from that. Deal with the issue of reforming our entire immigration system separate from this. But don't, like the Democrats, the left always loves to do, is hold anything that the right wants to do hostage to something that would give them a feather in their hat and actually nullify either what the right wanted to do, or actually do some things that would actually make it worse, such as back in the 1980s when President Reagan realized that something needed to be done about that nasty border situation. He went to then Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, and they struck a deal. They were good. Back then, you could actually have a drink with opposition party, and they did. They used to go out, President Reagan and Tip O'Neill, leader of the House, would go out, Democrat, would go out after they got through with business of the day, and they have a drink together. They reached an agreement, and that agreement was that that we would secure the border, and that was the responsibility of Tip O'Neill. He was supposed to pass legislation that would ensure that there would be border security. In deference to that, in the tit for tat, the thing to get in return for doing that was President Reagan promised amnesty for the people that were already here illegally. So naturally, just like Lucy with the football, with Charlie Brown and what happens, you see that cartoon every time, and we always fall for it. The Republicans are always Charlie Brown. The Democrats are always Lucy. And what happened was we did the amnesty and we did not secure the border. I don't believe that Tip O'Neill had any desire to fulfill his end of the promise, and they always wait for the Republican to do what they've said they'll do before they turn around and they pull out the football. And that's exactly what they did in the 80s. And so there's a group of illegal aliens even back then that was given amnesty. And these people, the angel moms and others, are saying, let's not do this anymore. Build the wall, reform the immigration system, deal with the illegal aliens. Do not group them together so that you end up with the give and take. And when national security and the lives of our children and our loved ones are on the line, just so that the left can always have another feather in their cap for having pulled the football away as the Republicans flip in the air and land on their backs.
Yeah, absolutely, DC. And we're far too late in the game here. Too much is on the line to risk trying to deal with people that have proven themselves to be unfaithful in their negotiations. So Trump is a smart negotiator above all things, and he's not going to be the Ronald Reagan to the Nancy Pelosi Tip O'Neill or whatever way you might want to phrase it. It occurs to me that there's basically always been, for a long time, two dueling narratives in America, and you've alluded to that here, that there's the narrative of what makes us great is us agreeing to compromise. And some people apply that to everything, that we've got to compromise on everything in order to make the country work. The other narrative is we've got to be faithful to rule of law and the Constitution and take and recognize priorities in terms of what's things are more important principle-wise that can't be abandoned. And I'm firmly in the second camp and believe that the founders were as well, that they compromised on the small things when but they kept the big things in view. And the border is certainly the biggest of the big things. I can't think of anything more.
Yep, and apparently people are getting the message. And one of the people that I know has known the message the entire time is President Trump. From before he ran for president, he was committed to the building of the wall. In fact, that was the cornerstone of his platform to run for the president. He, in my mind, has been trying very hard, even though there's others that disagree and blame the whole lack of the wall on him. I have no clue how they can reach that conclusion, but they have. But I believe that President Trump has had a plan. He's been working the plan. He's had a whole lot of other things he had to do as well, and he had to get the right things in place before he actually tried to drive this thing home by taking some unusual steps in order to ensure the border security through what he might need to do in order to finish that wall. So step 2 to this article is the fact, or this issue, is the fact that in 3 hours, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is going to stand before the American people, and he is going to have he's going to deliver an address to the nation, and you can see it live if you go to Right Side Broadcasting Network. It's going to be broadcast live in 3 hours from the White House. And President Trump, is going to tackle not only the issue of the border wall and what we need to do, the shutdown government and how we can get through this without having to compromise, and then also the reform of the immigration system. Those are all going to be topics he's going to discuss in his address tonight.
DC, I'm looking forward to that. And one thing that amazed left, we also know that they're going to the left, the Democrats are going to have a counterpoint to this speech that is apparently going to be covered by all of the major networks. And I think that might be one reason why you suggested watching it on Right Side, RSBN. I think that's a great idea because they won't need to carry that, and you can avoid that. But my goodness, it's just like these people don't miss a trick. They're in actual fact, as well as I've been able to determine, there has never been a Democratic rebuttal to any speech of the president other than the State of the Union. And so this is really a first, and this is how divided we are, that the Democrats feel like they have to actually offer an alternative viewpoint to the idea that we have to protect our borders. And what I'm seeing online is that these guys are actually saying that the left in general are actually in denial that there is a serious problem on the southern border. They're just in plain, pure denial. So I'm hoping that President Trump offers some very clear examples, and as well as quotes from ICE leadership, et cetera, and all of the border control. That those of us that are paying attention, we know this is real. I'm hoping that those that catch the president tonight will get enough evidence that they'll also be swayed that this has to be done.
Absolutely has to be done. The timing is right for it now, and I still believe that this plan that President Trump has been unfolding over the last 2 years in order to get to where we need to be, he has not stopped building the wall. He has been building the wall the entire time. He's just not broadcasting it. There have been, with that, and thank you to George Soros, who sent the invasion army to overwhelm us on the southern border a few months ago. And the response from that was that President Trump did the right thing. He sent down he sent down troops, he sent down the military, and he had them bring materials with them. They put concertina wire. They re-erected some walls that had been dilapidated, and spent some time then creating a portion of the wall that the Democrats refuse to fund. But what's also interesting is at the same time, he was, in my opinion, exhausting all measures of civil interaction with the left, with people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, to highlight for the American people, to show for the American people that I have no concern about the American people. They don't, either like you're saying, and it could be true that they're just clueless. I don't think they're clueless. I think they're nefarious. I think this has been a purposeful operation from day one. This goes back decades, that they have purposely brought in people to replace us. Because if they have people that are right-leaning, that will not vote for their initiatives, they're not going to just say, well, gee whiz, I guess in the arena of ideas, we have just lost the challenge. We don't have the ability to sway the public, and our arguments are losers. They're not going to walk away. They never walk away. What they do is say, okay, so you don't agree with me, so I'm going to replace you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring somebody from a third world country in here who's completely antithetical to the rule of this country, the foundation of this country, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of the amendments therein, and the foundations and the culture and the way that we do things. I'll just bring in people that will go along with me. I'll bring in people that will vote for us. And the people then will displace you. And how do they displace you? Well, I think the moms, the angel moms, could tell you exactly how their children have been displaced. Because don't forget that when these illegal aliens murdered these people, well, those people are dead, and the illegal aliens are still here. So didn't they just replace people that they disagree with? And that's what, in my opinion, that's exactly what this is all about, because they know that if they bring in serfs and slaves from other nations, that's what they will become. They will vote for the left because they'll get them hooked on welfare. The first thing that they offer them when they come into this country is, and just like in California, then we have Governor, we got rid of Governor Moonbeam, thank goodness. Jerry Brown is finally done, put a lid on him, send him away. Never want to hear the word Jerry Brown again in my life. But now we've got Gavin Newsom. And the first thing that Gavin Newsom does as the new governor of California is he says, everybody's welcome. Come on in. He doesn't care about, maybe people that were on legal petitions in order to bring them to this country for 35 years. I have, personal connections to a situation like that. He doesn't care about the people that have spent money that have had people on petitions in their families for many years. They have spent money through lawyers in order to try to get them here legally. They have done other things to get them educated in a way that they could be brought in to fill jobs that couldn't be filled by American workers. They want to make that all go away and be replaced by illegal aliens that will continue to vote for them.
Yeah, I agree with you, DC. Actually, when I was thinking, my points before related more towards those that are undiscerning and pick up the talking points of those that are in the leadership of the Democratic Party. Because obviously these guys that are out to break down the country and sell us out internationally, border control and everything else, and relocate factories offshore and basically cannibalize the country. America for Sale, Dr. Corsi's book. those guys are not going to tell the Democrat voters what they're doing. So they have a whole army of useful idiots that believe that they're the good people. And so those are the ones that I kind of have in mind when I'm talking about the dueling narratives. There's this narrative that supports these guys being the white hats. They think they're the good guys, these leftist Dems, the guys that are kind of, the trendies that like to virtue signal.
Yep. And speaking of the useful idiots, we have a continuing situation, moving on to another article that is coming to us from the conservative treehouse. So Jim Jordan, who's a Republican member of Congress, Doug Collins, and Mark Meadows are taking action to expose the ongoing DOJ institutional fraud. Now, this is interesting because what you've got to understand is for 2 years, with the manipulated recusal of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the reign of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein taking Sessions' place when it came to the issues that involved the special counsel, FBI Director Christopher Wray, who's been hiding under his desk since he was appointed, FBI Director David Bowditch, who's kind of been over on the FBI side, again, maybe hiding under a desk, FBI Chief Legal Counsel Dana Bonte, and Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and the rest of the gang of black hats and leftist political operatives within the DOJ and FBI. So this wrecking crew has held justice hostage. The result has been, over the last 2 years, zero progress with the actual legal process when it comes to finding out who has really done what. Instead, we go off on these red herrings. We appoint a special counsel who then goes after President Trump when he comes up dry, trying to prove that there was collusion between, and collusion isn't even a crime, collusion between President Trump and Russia. And when that comes up empty, then they go after his friends and his family and a variety of others. And so over 2 years, we have had all of this activity, which has resulted in zero outcome other than a continuing investigation. Maybe the entire process with Robert Mueller is he's investigator-in-chief for the entire administration of President Trump. He will not quit until he's thrown out. They talk about the fact that he might be issuing a final report soon. I'll believe it when I see it. I think he'll stay until somebody puts him in a bag and drags him away. But what we've had now for the last 2 years is you've got a variety of people that are supposed to have been looking out for the American people and doing things at the Justice Department, within the Inspector General's Department, people that are prosecutors like Huber from Utah, and you don't see anything. You don't hear anything. There's no substantive results from anything they've done. There's a lot of words on paper. There's millions and millions and millions of American dollars, taxpayer dollars have been spent with people filing reports, investigating things, and getting together and talking about it and going on television, and on the left they're talking about that there's absolutely no problem with anything that somebody like Hillary Clinton has done, but boy, that Donald Trump needs to be thrown on his ear because there is no because. They haven't found anything he's done that's a crime or misdemeanor that rises to the level of an impeachment offense in order for him to be removed from office. But they continue to investigate. They continue to ensure that the black hats are in place in all of these positions, in all of the different agencies of the government that are responsible, in order to turn over the rocks, to find the snakes, to beat the snakes, to put either the snakes in jail or behead the snakes. Instead, you got the snakes running the snake house. And it just gets to the point where you've got to either come up with a new way of approaching things, replace everybody that's in these positions that's supposed to be taking action and is not. And so what's happening now is you've got Jordan, Collins, and Meadows that are stepping up their fight to shine light on this darkness. And they are now taking action to ensure, in the way that they can now that they're in the minority in the House, rather than leading committees. But they're not going to give up. They're continuing then to go after the left and to make sure that people like Rod Rosenstein, the deepest of the deep state operatives, are put in their box. And where is acting Attorney General that's supposed to be stepping up? Matthew Whitaker, and taking action to ensure that these bad actors like Sally Yates, Andrew Weissman, these people, these leftist hit people that have been put into place in order to take good people down while ignoring the massive wrongdoings of the deep state operatives like the Clintons and others that get away with get out of jail free cards, that are told even before they're formally interviewed that they're given, you know, immunity from any prosecution, while no one on the other side is given any kind of immunity unless you're somebody like a Dr. Jerome Corsi, who they say, as long as you lie, then we'll give you a plea agreement, and maybe we'll give you a little lesser sentence for not having lied, but on paper signing a document that says you did lie. That's how we'll treat you. We'll bankrupt you. We'll drive you crazy. We'll make you lose your business opportunities and have to focus for months all of your attention on defending yourself against specious claims, while at the same time all the people that have been involved, like this monster, Andrew Weissman, who's one of these people that's responsible for going after innocent people time after time again, and finding them guilty of things they didn't do in order to get feathers in his hat and assume higher level positions in the government. But hopefully with Jim Jordan, Doug Collins, and Mark Meadows, and movement of a lot of this activity to the Senate now, and having it investigated from the Senate instead of the House, maybe we'll start to see some action. What do you think?
Well, I sure hope so. Sure hope so, Dee. One of the things, as you were relaying Dr. Corsi's general position, I agree with you that it's so essential for somebody like him to come in and reveal the depth of malfeasance that's going on within the Department of Justice. And one additional detail I'd like to point out and remind people of, if they are not familiar with Dr. Corsi's case or his circumstances, is that the plea agreement was to be secret and sealed, and that would have been him pleading guilty. If he hadn't gone public, we never would have known the details of what that would be, because it would be sealed. He said he's not going to sign it, so he made that agreement, the tentative agreement, public. And what it actually would have done to him was he would have invalidated his own licenses with regard to the SEC. I forget the exact title of the license, but because he would be guilty of a felony, even if the felony was sealed, he would have to reveal it by the prior agreement for his licensing boards, and that would have cut off a source of income. So this is how this is the way that dictatorial regimes operate. They have secret courts, secret proceedings that are not the way a free country operates. So again, it's so essential that a man with Dr. Corsi's integrity came forward and said, no, this will not happen in America, not to me, not on my watch.
And there's a couple additional articles I want to throw up here that show that there is some action. There are some new events that are taking place. There's some information that's coming to light that may drive Robert Mueller, his investigation, into closure, whether he wants it or not. This is a piece from the Gateway Pundit. And so WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. So Julian Assange was with WikiLeaks. They had these emails that, my opinion, Seth Rich had put on a flash drive as he was unhappy with what took place when Hillary Clinton's steamroller organization pushed Bernie Sanders aside so that she could be the nominee for president in 2016. He was a Bernie Sanders supporter. Sanders was pushed aside, improperly at the least, let's say it that way. And so Seth Rich, may have downloaded those emails onto his flash drive. He pushed it over to a friendly organization that was famous for revealing the truth of things that governments and others didn't want revealed, and that was WikiLeaks. Julian Assange was the head of that organization at that point in time. And what's happened then is this Russian collusion narrative. this WikiLeaks Julian Assange supposed connection, that they've never connected these dots, but they're trying to force the connection of dots between people like Dr. Corsi and Roger Stone and Donald Trump Jr. and others up to Donald Trump so they can bring him down, and it has not worked. So now, for the first time, in my knowledge, that Julian Assange or WikiLeaks on his behalf has come forward and made an official denial of any Russian collusion in the release of the Podesta emails, and that they are saying that there has been no contact with Donald Jr., Roger Stone, Jerome Corsi, Paul Manafort, and General Flynn. So now this is the official position of WikiLeaks, the organization that should know exactly where that information came from. And bottom line is, WikiLeaks, on behalf of Julian Assange, is saying that it is false and defamatory to suggest that WikiLeaks or Julian Assange privately provided information about its then pending 2016 election-related publications to any outside party, including, and then it goes on to everybody I've already talked about, and in addition to that, Nigel Farage and Cambridge Analytica, Rebecca Mercer, and it's defamatory because it falsely imputes that Julian Assange acted without integrity in his role as the editor of WikiLeaks, associates with criminals, or had committed a crime. In order for Julian Assange to have associated with criminals or committed a crime, he would have had to have been dealing with the Clintons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's huge, DC. And yes, I agree with you. It's the first time that WikiLeaks has taken that position, but they really were forced into taking that position because the mainstream media worldwide is outright defaming them in just the way you described. So they had to use this legal language to defend themselves, their organization, and truth itself, because that's what's on the line here.
Absolutely. So that's an interesting piece, that event that's taken place. And here's another one. If anybody's familiar with Kim.com, Kim.com is this hacker that became very famous as he was involved in some things that were going on as far as getting into computer databases and doing things with information and so on. And Kim.com has come out now, and he has said, and this is the quote from the True Pundit, "The criminals who run the deep state will be exposed." He just came out with this yesterday. Kim.com is teasing that there's going to be another round of leaks. That, in other words, he's got the goods on some other deep state players, and he is getting ready to do a data dump and to release this to the public. What do you think about this, Arrow?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And when I saw by Kim.com, I thought that there was a pretty strong implication that he was associated with or in communication with this, what was the name of that group? The Operation Dark something or other?
I can't remember.
I forget the name. Sorry. Yeah, but these guys that were blowing the lid off of the 9/11 papers. So, yeah, these guys are doing what they can to get the truth out, and I think that's important. That is what journalists have always done. People need to remember that this is not that blowing the whistle, telling truth to power or to the people about what big power is doing has always historically been what real journalism has been about. It's only been within the last decade or two that, especially when Western journalism has gone pro big government, deep state, and been an instrument of the state within Western society. And that needs to change.
I'm with you. So, Kim.com, we love you, buddy. Come forward. Let's see the. Go ahead and leak. You know, at this point in time, the ship of state, the American government, is a sieve. Only when it benefits the left. Only when it benefits the deep state, the government, our shadow government overlords. And then it's tight-lipped whenever it's information that actually should come out that would either destroy the left, destroy the deep state, or support something that's 1 inch to the right of the left pole where they all hang out. We'll see what happens with this. This is a piece from the New American, and this is interesting. We've got more refugees headed up this way. Hold your breath. Here they come. But the New American, what they were talking about earlier, is that there is a and it's already disappeared off their site. There was an article here that was that I can't find right now, but I'll talk to the points that they had put in it. And what they were reporting on is that that 2019 is going to be a turning point for voter fraud in this country, as President Trump and others have shined the light on the darkness that has been now going on for a half a century of wrongdoing on the part of the left to turn the United States into a banana republic, with the DNC being the banana plantation owners. And so the left orchestrated, and this is the piece I can't find right now, but I'll tell you the genesis of it, is that the left orchestrated a social media smear campaign to defeat Roy Moore. Now, if you remember, in Alabama, Roy Moore was running for Senate, and he was going to win. There was a deep state activity that was going on against him. There was a variety of leftist forces that were banding together to pool their money. The founder of, or the person that's been running, I don't know if he's the actual founder, president of LinkedIn, a billionaire, was using his money to pump into this election before the election took place. And the whole idea was to do two things. Part of it was to come up with this false narrative to try to link Roy Moore to Russia and make it seem as if there were Russians that were actually doing things to influence the election in favor of Roy Moore, especially with the Russia thing being on the tips of the tongues of all of the deep state puppets that sit in the broadcasting chairs at places like CNN and other mainstream news outlets. And so they were trying to, they spent money to make it appear that there was some kind of activity going on that was orchestrated from Russia that was being done in order to taint the opponent, Jones, in order for him to make it look like these Russian people, these Russian hackers, were actually supporting the election of Judge Roy Moore to be the senator from Alabama, while at the same time trying to defeat his opponent. Well, new information is coming out that it went way beyond that. They were actually then posing as Christian groups, as a Baptist organization. And if you remember, the smear campaign, one of the chief elements of the smear campaign against Judge Roy Moore, and he's now got lawsuits, and I believe Larry Klayman is representing Judge Roy Moore in this, is that they brought forward these women that, just like during the hearing of Judge Brett Kavanaugh, lied about activity involving that person. In this case, they lied about the past of Judge Roy Moore, made it appear that he had sexually abused or otherwise mistreated women, and they swore up and down that these things had taken place. And these social media actions were taken by the left to make it appear that some of the Christian organizations who are in that state were now opposing Judge Moore because they believed these claims to be correct. And that then, since this is a Bible Belt state, would influence others that of faith in that state to not vote for Judge Roy Moore. Well, it turns out that they ended up defeating Judge Roy Moore. The combination of everything that was done in order to smear him and to get people to vote for Jones instead of Moore, that worked. But it may only work if the new information that's coming out is not fully exposed and dealt with. Maybe we don't just have an election overturned in Arizona because of the fraud that took place in that election, and the Democrat that was seated maybe unseated because of that. But who knows what the outcome will be when they look deeper into what took place in Alabama with the improper activity that resulted in Judge Roy Moore not being confirmed or not being elected to that Senate seat from that state.
Yeah, DC, I hope that something changes in terms of those particular elections, but I'm not holding my breath for that particular outcome. My strong hunch is that what President Trump's people are doing, those that are gathering this information about what really happened in those cases, is that they are getting information to use against the deep state in the next round and the next time, and to force people to resign, quit, leave office, and maybe potentially even taking people to Gitmo. But I'm not sure what it is. There's something that maybe it's going to change tonight, but what I've seen so far is that President Trump seems to be positioning himself in such a way that it's very hard for the left to say this is a dictator. But as soon as he starts putting things in motion that change election results, I think that President Trump knows that he's got to have every thing at his disposal, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, everything completely ready to reveal the public. And that's a major offensive. And maybe he is going to begin it. Maybe it begins tonight. But so far, I haven't seen it.
Right. And don't forget that before the 2016 election, President Trump signed an executive order mobilizing government agencies to watchdog what was going on at the polls, to ensure that they gathered information about the fake voting that was going on. That information was to be compiled into a giant report and plunked on President Trump's desk on December 21. We haven't heard anything after that. I believe that that activity did take place, the viewing of the poll activity and so on. I believe that it was compiled into a report, and I believe it was presented to President Trump. Now, it'll be, once again, in my opinion, a matter of timing for when President Trump will act on the information about that illegal voting activity that took place. Hotbeds of activity targets always been Florida after the 2000 election when George Bush was elected, prevailed over Al Gore, and since then Florida has been a target of the left to make sure that enough illegal voting and the dead people and people that vote twice, who knows, these snowbirds that live in New York City, these dedicated leftists, Democrats in New York City, also have homes down in Florida, their summer homes, or their winter homes rather, and so they did those folks vote in both places. A lot of that activity has been swirling around what has been going on in Florida, and I would believe it's going to form a big portion of what's on President Trump's desk in the form of that compiled report, and I would believe there's a lot of other information will be about massive voter fraud in California due to all the illegal aliens that are hanging out in that formerly Golden State and other places like Arizona. And God willing, it'll come to the fore, action will be taken, and people will be forced to, you were saying that you resign or vacate office in another way, and we will see, and I'm praying that it is so.
Yeah, you just triggered a thought there, DC, when you mentioned the Florida election, and the whole business with the hanging chads and all of that went to the Supreme Court. I just realized as you were talking there that if President Trump begins to take action by revealing information about fraudulent elections, it's not going to be limited to one election. That's going to cause legal precedent and cause the Democrats to go go all the way back to that presidential election in which the 2000, where with Gore and Bush, and that's going to be up for grabs. And then, boy, we've really got chaos. Then, what do you do about that? So that could be one reason why President Trump is holding off on playing those cards that have to do with changing the results of elections. Just a thought.
We will see. And speaking of resignations, this is one that Errol brought to my attention earlier today. This piece comes from the information agency Newsfront. And that's another one of these outside of the United States news organizations that specializes in reporting on news from certain countries. And this is from Serbia, Russia, Estonia, Bulgaria, and other places. And this is about the fact, and I'll let you carry most of the ball on this one, Arrow, if you're so inclined, is that we have received word as of yesterday that where are we? Is today today. I was already going forward a day and thinking it was the 9th today. So the head of the World Bank has resigned. And do you want to talk a little bit about what you think the impact is with that event?
Well, I will put it in this context that may or may not be 100% true or certainly not verifiable, but I heard Alex Jones say that President Trump fired the head of the World Bank. I thought that was a pretty interesting way to put it. I do think Alex Jones has some pretty, interesting, probably very reliable sources at the global patriotic nationalist movement. So I'm tended to think that something like that happened, where President Trump said, look, okay, we all know that President Trump has been fighting this battle for nationalism, not only on our own United States of America front, but globally, and made alliances with behind the scenes with other leaders that wanted to restore their national sovereignty and not give in to the globalists. And of course, we know that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, and other organizations like that are at the core of the globalists' plan. So, in order to make a change in the leadership of those organizations, the charters of those organizations require that there be some consensus of the members of those groups. So, what am I saying? I'm saying that I think it's very likely that President Trump worked with the other nationalist leaders that he has working relationships with to make a change in the leadership of the World Bank, so that the nationalists would have actually a seat at the table there at the top. That that they have a veto power. If this guy, a former president of the World Bank, was taking things in a totalitarian and monopolistic and a direction, that would be brought to an end. And I think something like that happened.
And it could be. And what's interesting is, of course, the official line here is that he decided to resign. His term was not to expire until 2022. So he resigns 3 years early, and the official reason supposedly being his desire to return to work in the private sector. Could this be an outcropping, a result of the legislature, of the executive order that President Trump signed on December 21, I believe it was, 2017, about how people that were involved in nefarious activities worldwide, that could have their assets seized and other action to be taken against them if they were involved in any kind of corruption and or human trafficking or anything else. Could this be another shoe to drop in that bucket? Or could it just be that he's another deep state player, because this guy's a globalist all the way, who's just gotten caught up in who knows what, to the point where he has to bow out before he gets bowed out. And I don't know what the replacement is. I've heard, Arrow, I think we've heard a couple different things today about whether then this executive director, this Kristalina Georgieva, who was the executive director, she then takes over, I believe, on an interim basis, and then somebody will then be permanently assigned as the new group president for World Bank. I don't know how that process works. We've heard some different opinions about who appoints whom and who is able to actually remove this group president from his position. But I would think that there's some information will unfold, and we'll get some clarity as far as how this thing unfolded and where it's headed next as days go on.
Yeah, and I would encourage people not to necessarily think that you're going to get all the answers, because I think a lot is being veiled. A lot is occurring behind the scenes that is in our favor, but it's being less than completely transparent as it has to be, because what we can't do, and what a lot of patriots wanted, I think, is actually not really achievable or really in our best interest, and that would be, well, ending the World Bank and every nation on its own, and we figuring out how to do what we've been doing just without a World Bank. Well, I'm sorry, but that ain't going to happen. The world has been functioning in a very sophisticated way for decades, so we can't get rid of that overnight. That would plunge us into chaos, which would actually give the bad guys more power. So President Trump is very wise in taking a very, well, I guess you'd have to say a nuanced approach to reform, in which he changes the direction by changing the leadership and forms alliances that make things go in the right direction. So I'm not actually hoping to learn too much of the inside details, because we've never had that from any of the people at the World Bank or such organizations. But I think the patriots that want to know, we can look to places like Q for some of the details that might be hinted at. But I don't think we're going to get any kind of upfront reports about what's really going on, at least not at this point in time.
I agree. And finishing things out for today, I'm going to focus a little bit on the Zero Hedge article. This is talking about how the United States and China are still making progress on their trade deals. They may not be ready to conclude the trade deal, but they're moving in that direction. And the reason I wanted to end on this is I'm going to try to end these broadcasts on a positive note, in that no matter what the left does, what the deep state does, the shadow government overlords, the black hats around this world, there are still the white hats. There are people like the President Trump. He's got people around him. Not all of them are on his side, but many of them are. I believe his trade team is a good team. Peter Navarro, the former professor from University of California, Irvine, who's an expert in China trade, and he's one of the chief architects of what's going on in the dealings between the United States and China in order to level the playing field. When you've got somebody who's an expert in financial dealings like President Trump, aligned with these people like Peter Navarro and others, Lighthouser, his boss, in order to make sure that we do things in order to stop all of this, that's red Chinese dragon, from stealing our technology, from stealing our secrets, from building up their military, and doing a lot of it by getting the money that they can get by having these disproportionately aligned trade deals, in which money and jobs flow out of the United States like a river, and very little trickles back to us in return. And now the playing field is being leveled. And with that, then, Donald Trump is, no matter what's going on with the wall, with anything else, with the voter fraud, with the what's going on with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whether she's alive or not alive, why did she miss that first session that she's never missed before? With all of that going on, swirling with everybody, he still continues to calmly and one step at a time down the road to improvement, take action that's important and necessary in order to ensure that at the end of the road, we're going to have a better set of relationships with with countries like North Korea and China and others. The trade deals will be in our favor. He's not going to sign off on something that's going to continue down the path of these, rotten deals that were made before with NAFTA and the other deals. Like I think it was Ross Perot back in 2000, or I'm sorry, back in the 1992, that had said that what you hear with a deal like NAFTA is this huge sucking sound, and that sucking sound was the pulling of all the jobs and the money, the wealth out of this country, and the transference to the other countries. And I believe that Donald Trump, with the action that he's taking and what he's doing now to level the playing field with China, is going to ensure that those unfair trade deals that existed in the past are going to be replaced by deals that aren't fully in our own favor, but are level, that are fair, and that's what he's trying to get done here.
And DC, within the last few days, there's been another aspect of this that's occurred to me, and that's that there have been, I think, back channels that have been created through these deals that President Trump is bringing to an end. And in other words, the negotiations were less than on the up and up. I mean, you might think that if somebody could read the deal and figure out that somebody's benefiting more than another, I think it might be more involved than that. I think that there has been, for instance, you noticed how willing the Congress under Nancy Pelosi was to approve these foreign aid deals. Well, there's strong implications that these foreign aid deals have been a way to back channel money to the deep state within the United States. So it comes back in a different form and an untraceable, basically using other countries to money launder for us. I strongly suspect that in a lot of these previous agreements between the United States, there have been back channels like this, and I believe that President Trump is putting an end to that. So I'm actually very hopeful. That I think the reason that we haven't had agreement is because it takes a kind of a fine-tooth comb to go through these agreements and find out, well, what's this? What's this? Is this some doorway? We want to find out where this goes. And there's a lot of detail work involved in all of that.
I agree. And on that note, I want to finish out the broadcast for today. And so, to the deep state operatives, our New World Order governing overlords, the black hats everywhere, I say repent, your time is running out. The hammer of justice is headed your way. Abandon the leaking ghost ship while you can. Save yourselves from this wicked generation, for we will never surrender. We will never be silenced. We will continue to fight on to victory in God's name. God bless you all. We are looking forward to being with you again tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern Time.
We celebrate the victory in truth.
Amen.